her evidence earlier in the defamation trial gripping Australia, Brittany Higgins revealed she'd been paid around $2.3 million by the Commonwealth, minus taxes and legal fees. There's been no conviction in this matter, and the man Higgins accuses of raping her in Parliament, Bruce Lehrmann, has vehemently denied any wrongdoing. In court earlier in the trial, here's how Brittany Higgins characterised it.
The Commonwealth admitted that they breached their duty of care and they didn't go through the proper processes, so that's actually why they settled with me.
In fact, the Commonwealth did not admit to breaching its duty of care. Justice Michael Lee said in the federal court on Thursday, contrary to the evidence given to me, there was no admission of liability. The deed was entered into evidence after lawyers for Higgins sought redactions of a number of details, including bank details and medical records. It shows the figure was in fact $2.4 million before tax and legal fees were taken out. It released the Commonwealth from future legal claims by Higgins, but it didn't protect former senior coalition ministers Linda Reynolds and Michaelia Cash from future legal action. The deed was signed in December 2022 under the Albanese Labor government, which had come to power earlier that year. Here's what it says. On 16 February 2022, the day after a Network 10 interview in which she said she'd been raped in Parliament and the rape had been covered up by politicians, Ms Higgins sent a legal document to the government. It alleged the Commonwealth, former Prime Minister Scott Morrison and Ministers Reynolds and Cash were liable for legal claims in relation to the alleged sexual assault and had contravened the Sex Discrimination Act and the Fair Work Act. She alleged sex discrimination and victimisation against the ministers and made claims against their staff, including Fiona Brown and Daniel Try. In the deed, Higgins and the Commonwealth agreed on this paragraph.
Without any admissions of liability, the parties have agreed to resolve all claims by Ms Higgins against the beneficiaries relating in any way to the circumstances on the terms set out in this deed, and note that Ms Higgins does not intend to make a claim for compensation under the Safety, Rehabilitation and Compensation Act.
The settlement included
$400,000 for hurt, distress and humiliation suffered by Ms Higgins, $1,480,000 as a capital payment paid to Ms Higgins in respect to Ms Higgins' loss of earning capacity, $220,000 as reimbursement for medical and like expenses incurred by Ms Higgins arising from the alleged sexual assault and the events which followed, $100,000 for past and future domestic assistance, and $245,000 as reimbursement of Ms Higgins' legal costs and disbursements.
The deed acknowledges Brittany Higgins' claim that she would be unable to work in future thanks to the distress of her experience, and a particulars of liability document attached to the deed also makes a big claim about Jeroen Finkelstein, the former Chief of Staff to Scott Morrison. It says Finkelstein was a regular presence in Minister Reynolds' office advising her Chief of Staff, Fiona Brown, on how to deal with Ms Higgins in light of the alleged sexual assault. It alleges Finkelstein didn't consult Higgins. The Australian has reported Finkelstein in fact had never been in Reynolds or Brown's offices and didn't communicate with them about these matters. Brittany Higgins is a witness for the defence in a claim brought by Bruce Lehrmann, who denies any sexual contact with her, against Network 10 and presenter Lisa Wilkinson. The federal court spent Thursday hearing from witnesses with recollections from the days around the alleged rape, which Higgins says happened in the early hours of Saturday, March 23, 2019. Parliament House security guard Nicola Anderson said she entered the ministerial suite at around 4:20 a.m. to conduct a welfare check on the young woman who'd entered just after 1 a.m. She told the court that once inside, she saw a woman she now knows to be Brittany Higgins completely naked on the couch. These are Nicola Anderson's words in court, read by a voice actor. She's describing Higgins's dress under cross-examination by Steve Wybrow, counsel for Bruce Lehrmann. He's referring to Anderson's affidavit.
It just looked like it had been taken off and thrown on the floor.
You did not have any concerns in relation to her while you were doing a welfare check?
Yes.
And you say the woman opened her eyes and looked at you?
Yes.
And that the first thing you saw when you opened the door was that she was completely naked?
Yes.
And she opened her eyes, and did she speak to you?
No, She rolled over into the fetal position and faced the desk, the minister's desk.
And you say I did not observe the woman to be in any trouble or distress. That was your observation?
Yes, that is true.
Her face makeup appeared to be intact?
Yes.
Another security guard, Mark Fairweather, gave evidence about working at the ministerial entrance when Lehrmann and Higgins came in after 1 a.m. Steve Wybrow asked if Brittany Higgins was stumbling as she walked through the metal detector.
From what I can recall, she did stumble a little bit with her shoes, and they were told to take them off because the metal detector went off.
Brittany Higgins has previously said she was 10 out of 10 drunk on the night the alleged rape happened. Fairweather has 25 years' experience, including working at bars and as a bouncer.
I would have refused entry if I believed that they were heavily intoxicated.
Fairweather said he saw Lehrmann leaving hastily and looking at his phone. Nikita Irvine is a major in the Australian Army, and in 2019 she was working as an aide-de-camp to Linda Reynolds, the then Commonwealth Minister for Defence Industry. Irvine was present at the Friday night drinks on Friday, March 22, the night Brittany Higgins claims Bruce Lehrmann got her drunk and later raped her back at Parliament. In evidence to the trial on Thursday, Irvine described an uneventful night out, ending when she declined to kick on at the karaoke bar 88 MPH and walked home. Here's what Nikita Irvine told the court during her examination-in-chief by counsel for Network 10, Matt Collins, about why she didn't go to the bar.
Yeah, I wouldn't go out to a club with people I work with. Yeah, and when I started that office, I had bad vibes on Bruce and his future of the office, and he's not the sort of person I would have socialised with.
Just explain what you mean by bad vibes.
Well, I think he was moving on, like to another job somewhere else. People didn't, it's women's intuition, Dr. Collins, I'm sorry. I just didn't really want to spend time with him.
The next day she got a message from her friend Lauren Gain, who'd gone to the bar along with Brittany Higgins, Bruce Lehrmann and Austin Wenke.
Brittany hooked up with Bruce.
Irvine said a few days later a colleague in the office, Chris Payne, told her there'd been a serious incident and that Bruce Lehrmann would no longer be working there.
I didn't really think much of it. It wasn't my business. But I did notice that Brittany was very down. I had to go to the passport office and I asked if anyone would like to go for a walk with me. I was trying to invite Brittany on that walk because I was a bit concerned for her. She did look very sad. I said, "Are you okay?" And she said, "No." She said, "No. Have you heard what's happened?" I said, "No." She said, "On the weekend, Bruce, Austin, Lauren and I went to 88. Bruce and I were in an Uber to go home and he wanted to come back to Parliament House. He had some whiskey to show me or something. When we came back to Parliament House, I fell asleep on the couch and I woke up and he was on top of me. And I said, "Okay, was it?" And I paused and she said, "Yeah, definitely." And I took that to mean it was an assault.
Irvine said she was confident Higgins mentioned going to see the police about it.
The reason I'm certain police were mentioned is because it would have been a massive red flag for me if she had said something like, "I'm not taking this to the police." And I would have said, "You need to go to the police." I also told her that, this is big news. And she said, "Yes, with the election so close."
Irvine said she didn't know what Higgins meant by that, but she urged her to push on with a police complaint.
I said, "I'm really sorry. And, I really want you to press this. It's really bad what's happened." And I gave her reassurances that I was here if she needed to talk to me.
Irvine said she told both Minister Linda Reynolds and her Chief of Staff, Fiona Brown, she knew about an incident with Brittany.
I said, "Fiona, Brittany has told me what's happened." And she said, "Yes, it's very disconcerting." She mentioned that Bruce was already in trouble over a security incident, which I don't know anything about, but he wasn't hard to get rid of and they moved him on pretty quickly. My impression from that conversation is she wasn't entirely sure that it was an assault. That was my impression of it. And I didn't say what Brittany told me because that was her agency and her decision. And I was confident that if Brittany was going to sit down with Fiona again in the next couple of days, she would tell her exactly what had happened.
Irvine said she also told Linda Reynolds a week later.
I told Linda Reynolds when we were sitting next to each other on a plane on a tarmac in Canberra, I said, "Look, Brittany's told me what's happened and I've just offered her to talk to her to make her sure that she's okay." Her exact words were, "Yes, this makes me feel sick. Nothing like this has ever happened to me before."
Irvine raised it again with Brittany Higgins, and Higgins told her she was no longer pursuing the police complaints.
She said the police have told her it could take a really long time to get to court. It would be emotionally taxing on her, and it would be difficult to reach a conviction of Bruce from what happened.
Later in April, Irvine raised it again.
I said, "How are you feeling about everything?" And she said, "I've made my decision, and I just need to be comfortable with that."
Irvine said Higgins raised her hands in a stop motion.
I remember her hands were sort of like this, and I took that to mean that maybe I need to back off a bit and stop bringing it up with her.
Reynolds is not giving evidence in this case, but here's what she told The Australian in a February 2023 interview.
At the time, there was never an allegation of rape by Ms Higgins. However, through my discussions with my chief of staff and then subsequently with me, we could see she was distressed, which is why that first time I met with her, I suggested she talk to the AFP. Clearly, at some point it became clear she thought there'd been some sort of sexual activity. And as her boss, I was not well equipped to have that discussion with her.
Nikita Irvine said she never got any sense from Fiona Brown or Linda Reynolds they were trying to cover up the rape.
I didn't get any sense that it was being swept under the rug or anything like that.
Coming up, what Higgins told her boyfriend. Ben Dillaway was a close personal friend of Brittany Higgins, a slightly older, more experienced Liberal staffer and a confidant. They exchanged thousands of messages in 2019, including on the fateful Friday and Saturday, around Ms Higgins' alleged rape. Here are voice actors reenacting some of their messages.
I was barely lucid. I really don't feel like it was consensual at all. I just think if he thought it was okay, why would he just leave me there like that?
So he fucked you. I hope you're okay. This is pretty serious, horrible stuff. You probably need to report this.
Fiona, our chief of staff, knows. She followed up on the security report about it. Bruce has been terminated early. She said I can come back in tomorrow, but I'm considering just going home to the Gold Coast.
This is so heavy. I'm so sorry to hear.
Their messages have formed an important part of the evidence in the criminal trial, which was aborted, and now in these defamation proceedings. Higgins has told the court Dillaway was a good person who cared about her. But in her evidence earlier in this trial, she also said she was cautious about telling Dillaway she'd been raped because she was romantically interested in him and also concerned he might tell others in the Liberal Party. On the morning after the alleged rape, Dillaway called Higgins about 10 a.m. In her evidence, she said this was the time when she was waking up with a hangover, throwing up, devouring a box of chocolates and leaving Parliament House, trying to deal with the trauma of having been raped.
I recall her using the words, "We brought the party back to Parliament House." I thought that was quite strange. I'd worked in that building as an advisor for a number of years, and you'd almost never go back to Parliament to carry on or party, as she'd referenced.
Later that Saturday and Sunday, they continued messaging. In cross-examination, Lehrmann's counsel Steve Wybrow asked Dillaway this.
Throughout Saturday night and Sunday, you had no reason to think anything other than perhaps she didn't want to tell you something that she got up to, not in a sense of having been the victim of any crime.
Correct.
That time, you regarded yourself as in a boyfriend-girlfriend relationship.
I wouldn't use those terms. Let's say we were in a close personal relationship kind of via long distance. It was a very weird or unique thing. We weren't officially dating or going out. We were casually seeing each other and obviously living in different cities.
In 2021, after Higgins went public with her claims, Dillaway told the police this about the night at Parliament.
I've subsequently learned of what she alleges happened. I didn't think it was anything of that nature. And I thought maybe, she may have taken a few people back there and partied, or maybe, had hooked up with someone or something.
In court on Thursday, Dillaway said,
yes. And then when I started asking her about that in the phone call to try and draw out more details is when she became cagey and ended the conversation.
It was on the Tuesday after the alleged rape, 4 days later, that Higgins confided in Dillaway via text that she'd had sex she didn't believe was consensual. Dillaway immediately rang her.
What I remember from that call was me asking her probing questions and asking about what had happened on that night, putting it to her whether she was raped or sexually assaulted, her breaking down and ending the phone call in tears. I was in Melbourne at the time. I made the offer to come up to Canberra and see her in person to, I guess, be there for and helpful for her support.
He travelled to Canberra on March 27 and said he comforted Higgins while she cried.
I was staying at the Burberry Hotel and we met at the bar across from it and had a discussion about the events of the previous weekend. We did later, after having a drink, go back to my room. Again, I was asking her some questions around that evening. She again kind of broke down. My recollection is that she was crying a lot, sobbing, and I was somewhat, holding her, supporting her. She was very upset and appeared very broken.
Dillaway said although Higgins stayed with him at the Burberry that week, he didn't have any recollection of seeing a bruise on her thigh. He said she swore him to secrecy.
She had concerns about becoming known as the girl who was raped in Parliament.
Dillaway said they stayed in touch for the following months, and he sent her flowers and checked in on her most days. He said after about July 2019, he and Higgins drifted apart romantically, but remained friendly. He said on February 15, 2021, a friend, journalist Jeff Chambers from The Australian, sent him a story from news.com.au, breaking the news of Higgins' allegations.
I was in the gym when I received the message and read the story and almost fell off the workout bench. As I read, it was almost exactly what she told me, and I was kind of somewhat in shock reading it in the media.
Bruce Lehrmann vehemently denies any sexual contact with Brittany Higgins. The trial continues.